ahead.
Okay, so the first of all, chapter Nun Aleph, we covered that. I mean, there's no special questions. We pretty much covered what it meant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Nun Beis. Hina Pinas Pratius the Esespheres the Malchus Atzilus the Bria Achar Piyat Machtoch. Hariyadua Shapinas Keser Malchus the Bria Hanikra Atik the Bria Hush Nimshach Mepinas Malchus the Malchus Atzilus. Ulu. In other words, Malchus of Atzilus becomes Keser of Bria. Aino Pinas Aratzim Vatainog Lepinas Moker Labria Yesh Me'ein Mamish. Kamaimer Kad Salik Berus Lamivre Alma. Moshe Allah Ben Sain Lahatzil Hulu. So the same thing. When there was a Ratzin Lahatzil, then there was a Ratzin for the Bria, like what we talked about before. There was a Ratzin Lahatzil was like when he figures out in his own mind what he wants for the house. And the Bria is when he comes up, the Ratzin to come up with the original concept of the house. Like with an architect. So the same thing, like it came up in Ratzin Lahatzil, Kach Yared Ratzin Libra Yesh Me'ein Chulu. V'hu Anikra Keser Malchus the Bria. Moshe V'od Mokamacha B'inyan Yishmoel B'ni Barcheni. Amar Lo Yehi Ratzonu Fanecha Chulu. So Perush, Rabbi Yishmael Ken Godlai Abehechol Kochi Kadoshim the Bria. Shisham Yered Oyer Malchus the Malchus Atzilus Lias Kesel Abria. Al Ken Amar Lo B'ni Barcheni V'Amar Lo Yehi Ratzonu Fanecha Chulu. So it's the Keser, the Abisher in the way of Malchus the Malchus Atzilus that became Keser Bria came into there, and they told him, bless me. Umetchinas ataynu v'arotzen hazeh liyas abriya kulu nimshach v'chochma albina derotzen v'taynu gazeh v'nikrein avoda bria. Ume'avor shoypchinat chochma albina shel zeh arotzen v'taynu nimshach v'taynu samidish nikra zod bria. Umizal v'malchus bria. Shehu moker amehave eilon abriya neshamas emalochim me'en liyesh mamish. V'yesh v'eses firs abriya gam continues eires kelim alavushim v'echolos yadua be'inyan zayin echolos abriya. U'be'echal kochi kadoshim shehu heichal azayin sham yichud ezun chulu. And that's Bria, and that's where we're going to stop here. And basically, this chapter here, he goes through the whole Biyah. And basically what he says, then the whole thing repeats in Yetzirah, and the whole thing repeats in Asiyah. That's what he says in this chapter. So basically, what he just said over here is that the whole thing that we talked about, in other words, like he said, it goes down from the Ratzin to Avon, from Avon to Zun, This is all according to what he described earlier. How the light goes in Avon, it's three ways,
Yeah.
Chabat Chagas Nehi, and it goes that way, it's from the Pnimius, and that the different Yehudei Zun, they go according to the different Yehudim. And when it's Lohelid, it's Dafka, the Yehud has to be the Yehud Apnimi, the whole bit. The whole book was, what we did till now was
right.
These few lines here.
Right.
The whole book, chapters 1 through 51, with all the inyonim in it, with the Priya Mesitra Do, and the sadness and the happiness is two sides of the same thing, and the whole inyonim, everything. He covers here, and just 10 or 15 lines.
Right.
And it's basically what he said is now the whole thing is over, but it's in Bria.
Right.
And the whole thing, like he said over there, was a pierce of masach between the Atmos and Atzilus. This is like a whole new world again.
Right.
That it's a whole new mahus. Like, and so you have to go back and learn all those things that he was saying, how the change of mahus from the Atmos to Atzilus, you know.
Right.
Except over here, it's a masach. That's the difference.
Right.
That's what he said in the last chapter. It's a masach.
Right.
That's all different. Okay, anyway, so have a good Shabbos.
Go ahead.
One base. Between Pratius, Esses, Piers, the Malchus, Atzilus, the Bria, Achar, Abkias, Amasach, Area Dua, Shapinas, Kesha, Malchus, the Bria, Nikra, Atik, the Bria. Who should name Sham and Pilas, Malchus, the Malchus, Atzilus. Cholu. I know Pinas, Arotzim, Vatay, no Glapinas, Mokel, the Bria, Yeshma, Ein Mamish. Kamai, Merkat, Flik, Berut, Lemivre, Alma. The Gemara she'ala b'tzon la'atzil chulu, kach yored arotzen livre yesh me'ein, and that was explained before. The four explainers are included. V'hu anikra kesem malchus debriya. So the thing is that the thing is like it says in the Ksorim, there's no real Hishtalshelut. Because Kesher of Bria is already included in Ak. And it's already included in the Rotzen HaKodum and even the Rotzen HaPoshim. And even though it comes out of Malchus of Atzilus, it's not really like a lower thing. It's mamish a keser. A keser is always a keser. And what it means is that, like, in other words, that the Rutzen to go to the architect comes at the end of the Maaseh of when he figured out himself what he wanted.
Right.
So from the Malchus of Atzilus comes Kesher of Bria. But nonetheless, the Kesher, the Rotzen for Bria, is just as strong and just as connected to the Atmos as the Rotzen for Atzilus. All the way to the Rotzen of Asiya. Not only that, the Rotzen for the final Asiya, which means Kesher of Malchus of Asiya, is in the way higher than Kesser of Atzilus. Because that's really what he wanted.
Right.
What he really wanted was a deer batachtonim, the end of the Maaseh.
Right.
So even though, nonetheless, that the Kesser, like he's going to explain, Kesser of Asiya comes out of Malchus of Yetzirah. But it makes no difference. It's a Kesser of the same equal stature.
Right.
As far as being a Kesser, in the Ksorim, there's no real Hishtalshelut. The Kesser, that's the Rotzen. The Rotzen for Asiya is the same like the Rotzen for Atzilus. In other words, when he goes to the architect and when he goes to the contractor, so you won't go to the contractor until the architect is finished, and from the Asiya of the architect comes the Rotzen of the draftsman who does the Yetzirah, the tour of the building, and from the Asiya of the draftsman comes the Rotzen of the Asiya. But nonetheless, the Rotzen of the Asiya is equal with the Rotzen to go to an architect. And maybe even higher, because that's Mamish, when he's actually building the building, then you see he's really, wow, we're Mamish building the building now. And when he's finished with it, which is Malchus of Malchus, that's the real Rotzen. So, Livra Yesh Mehem, V'hu Anikra Kesem Malchus the Bria. And by the way, that's why it's called Kesem Malchus, Dafka. Because it's the Rotzen really for the end of the Maaseh. Right. That's the main thing of the Kesser, is Dafka for the Malchus. Commotion word more kamach rabinin small bnibarch and the amalo yirot sonu fanecha chulu. Hirosh Rabbi Shmuel kain God le'abe echol kodesh kadosh in the bria. Sham yered malchus the malchus datzilus lios kesel bria. Al ken amar lo bnibarch and amar lo yirot sonu fanecha chulu. said he was, that even though he was in the Kreitzer Kadoshim of Bria, this was nonetheless from Malchus of Atzilus becoming Kesher of Bria. And that's why he said to him, help me come down, Barcheni.
Right.
So he said, Yira Tzomim Fanecha, means, Barcheni means help me come down properly. And he said, Yira Tzomim Fanecha, Shiagolu Rachamecha Midosecha, something like that, you know.
Right.
ומבחינת התיינוג והרוצן הזה להיות הבריח הוא נמשך בחוכמה בינה דרוצן ותיינוג הזה ונקרא עבוד הבריח מעבוד ובחינת חוכמה בינה של הרוצן והתיינוג נמשך ובחינת המגדל שנקרא זוד הבריח ומזו למלכוס הבריח שהוא מוקר מהווה אילם הבריח נשמות המלוכים אין לי יש ממש כולו. That's the malchus of Bria, brings about the Cholos of Bria. Yes, באיזה ספירס דבריאה גם כן פינס ארס, וכלים ולבושים ואכולוס כידוע בעניין זין יכולוס דבריאה בהיכל קודשי קדושים שהוא היכל הזין, שם ייחוד הזון חולו. And this, basically, like we said before, this is how far I went last time, but this is the whole book.
All over again.
All over again in Bria.
Right.
All of this he says, but how does it work? What do you mean, Avod Bria from Avod to he says from Avod to Zon, from Zah to Malchus, blah, 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 boop, finished. So how does it work? Well, look, go back. The Yechudei Zon, how do Yechudei Zon work over there? How does Yechudei Zon work over here? ומבחינת מלכוס דבריאה, נאי מבחינת כסף ועתיק יומן לעולם היצירה, גם כן על ידי בחינת מסך שבין בריאה ליצירה. And here's also a מסך. על דרך הנ"ל במסך שבין אצילוס לבריאה, שזה כמו שעל ברצונו לברוא, כך על ברצונו ליצירה ועשייה. Same thing.
Right.
And all bertzayna real means in the Rotzen HaPashut. Means that it's the Kesser of Asiya and Yetzira and Asiya, even though it comes out from the Malchus of the previous level, but a Kesser is connected to the Atmos. Rak shetzarech liyos hefsek parsa ben seif maaseh the Rotzen the Bria l'tchilas harotzen the Yetzira. And that's the same thing like over there, like the difference that between Atzilus and the Atmos is no Masach, there's just a Tzimtzum. But over here there has to be an actual Masach. And the same thing from Bria to Yetzirah is also a Masach. Moshe Ne'emar L'chvedi Brativ Yetzartiv Av Asitiv Yadua Debiyah Hanikra Gimel Oilomos Hanifrodim Me'en Liyesh Mamish Hainu Kedugmas Yishavus Oisis HaMachshava B'dibur Maisis Sheboim B'finat Yesh Nifrod L'Asa Mamish, but nonetheless you see that the thing that Bria is like Oisis HaMachshava, that even though it's a Yesh inside of himself. And Yetzira is like Dibur, that even if it's a Yesh that's already coming out to somewhere else, but it's half and half. It's half in and half out. And Maisa means that it's totally different. Kach mepinas eisies hamachshava, the midos. What does it say there? Midos Elokim.
Midos Elokim, right.
The Bria, Nikra Zod the Bria canal, Nivrum Bizer, Pinas Alman Stim in the Lois Gallion. Same like Machshava. But it's separate worlds, but Stim in the Lois Gallion. Like Machshava. The Machshava is already a Yesh, but it's hidden inside of himself. Shen Neshomas Malachim Deilum Abria Me'en Liyesh Mamish, Mon Nishmas Avra Moavi Mepinas Snimius Akelim Dechesed Dezosh of Malchus the Bria. Umichoel, the Eilum Abria Mepinas Chitzonius Akelim. In other words, the Neshomas is in the Pnimius Akelim, and the Malachim is Chitzonius Akelim. Avram is Pnimius Akelim, and Michoel, which is the Malach of Chesed, is Chitzonius Akelim. And the same like this with all the Midos. Right? Is the Chesed, the Zod, the Bria. Michoel Koil, right? The Ken Gan Edula Alien the Bria, Hainu Mepchinas Oira Kesed the Bria, Shohua Tainu Ga Alien Shnikra Atik the Bria, Shmistamsim Babina, Shebemalchus the Bria. Shanashom is the Bria, Neine Meziv Chulu. In other words, the Malchus, which is in the Dibur, the Bina, which is in the Dibur, they receive the Dibur, and like the same like now, from the Dibur or the letters, we're receiving Bina. But the Bina is hidden in the letters. Not that they receive the Bina directly. V'kiyadua de'ima ilah mekana v'korsaya, shuhu or Bina d'Atzilus, al-idei Hishtalshelut Shabbos, ad Bina de Malchus d'Atzilus, v'Bina sheb Malchus d'Bria. Valder ze zod d'Atzilus mekana b'tziro, Malchus b'asiyah chulu. And that's the Indian of the Yud Ke Vav Ke with the four names and everything like that,
Right.
And the Yud Ke Vav Ke, though, remember, the Yud Ke Vav Ke is all in Atzilus.
Right.
It's just that Bina is Mekanana the Bria, the same thing like that the essence of himself is the Bina of it is in Machshava, like we say that in Leah is Bina.
Right.
And in the Yetzirah, in the emotions, is the inner Zoh. The inner emotions himself is in the outer actual heart. All the way to the Malchus, which is his inner Malchus, is what comes out into the Maisis.
Right.
V'kach hu inyan asrofim shem ba'ilma bria, hulu. And that's the Strophim in the Olam HaBriya from the Chitonis HaKelim, since they're Malachas. V'hen bnei Elokim shemityatsim al Havaya, shehu b'chinat Zod HaBriya, u'b'chinat Kelim de Zod HaBriya, u'b'chinat Matat Tzar shel Olam HaBriya. In other words, the Zoh of Atzilus is Zoh. That's when we say Zoh, that's Zoh of Atzilus. Zoh the Bria, in other words, Zoh of Atzilus is the Kelim of Zoh of Atzilus. And those are mekanen in Yetzirah, but in Bria, the Kalim of Zoh Bria, that's what's called Matat Tzar Shel Olam HaBria. Shne'er Bo Kishmi B'Kirboi. Shehu Havaya de Zoh Atzilus. In other words, Havaya de Zoh Atzilus is inside of the Torah of Olam HaBria. Even though it's already separate Kalim over here. Same like in the Machshava is the actual emotion. V'nikra na'ar ampe zutre legabe p'chinas ampe rabrabe p'chinas Zod Atzilus. And remember, Zoh means little face. So here he calls Zoh the big face. And he's calling the Matat is the little face.
Right.
Compared to the big face of Zoh, which Zoh means the little face, but that's Zoh of Atzilus.
Right.
Which where there is the little face in comparison to Arich. Will be klal nikra elam bria elam machshava b'chinas almin stimin chulu. K'mo b'yud nivra elam haba shuhu yud the machshava the bina the malchus the bria. Ubehei nivra elam hazeh b'chinas the yitzir v'asiyah. In other words, that from the Yud K, the Yud is Yud K, and the Hey is the Vav K. In other words, the first two letters include a division. You can divide, instead of Yud K, you can divide the whole Yud K, Vav K also into two. Yud K and Vav K. The Yud K, Vav comes from the Yud, means that the Olam Haba, that the Bina, that the Bria is like still, like the Machshava, which is still connected to the actual Etzem of the Seichel. And the Hey, from the Bina, he said, but wait a minute, I thought the Machshava comes out from the Bina. He says, yeah, that's a different testament. Over here, the Machshava is connected to the self, and in the Bina, from the Bina comes the Yitzir and Asiyah, the divisions of separate things. V'olam ha'yitzira, olam ha'dibur, alman didgal, Yinchulu. And remember, what he says here, that this Yud is not Mamish the actual Yud. That's the Yud of Machshava, of Bina, of Malchus, of Bria. Wa'elam ha'yetzira, elam ha'dibur, almin did galyan. They're already revealed worlds, but they're still worlds that are half in and half out. Ukmon avur tishaya b'sraf in the Bria. Sha'emrim kodesh v'yechezkel b'chayas v'efnim sha'emrim baruch. So there's Srafim in Bria, and Chayas in general. In general, there's all three in every world, but rather in particular, whatever. But in general, when you say Srafim is in Bria, Chayos is in Yetzira, and Afanim is in Asiya. While Derech Hanal be'ez spheres of Bria, Kacho be'ez spheres Yetzira. Vesifir's Asiya. Derech Pratius, Vayros V'Kelim, Lavushim, Be'cholas, Chulu. Everything is not only that, really the whole thing. So you say, but wait a minute, so what? You just told me what's happening in Atzilus, and now you're telling me I should figure out myself what's happening in Bia? And the answer is not really. We didn't really tell you what's happening in Atzilus. It's just the opposite. We really told you what's happening in Klippus. When we were talking about Chochmah and Bina, we were talking about our Chochmah and Bina. And from that, we were, what do you call it, made 3,000 Mashalim upwards into Atzilus. So really, it's easier to figure out Yetzira and Asiya. That's also, I mean, it's because really the original marshal that we gave was on Atzilus of the Nefesh Abhamis, really. That's what we were really talking about the whole time. Like when we said Chochmah, when we say Chochmah, what we mean by Chochmah is what is my head.
Right.
And the whole thing was Mipsari Ech Eloika. So the whole thing of Machshava, like when we say Machshava, when we're saying Machshava, we mean like our Machshava.
Right.
Or Dibur. Or Maisa. So it says that's the same like that, so the same like we said, this whole Inyan on Atzilus, so the whole thing on the same Inyan on Bia. They said, but wait a minute, so if they're all the same, so what's the difference? So he's telling you they're all the same. It doesn't mean they're all the same Mahus. It says they're all the same Metzius. That in each one there's Chochmah and Bina, and there's angels, but the angels of Bria is not the same like the angels of Asiya. And the same thing like the Machshava of Bria is not like your Machshava really. So you say, so what's the difference? It says, so the marshal on that is like the etzem of the person is like Atzilus, like the etzem of the seichel, the emotions. The machshava is like Bria. Dibur is like Yetzira. And Maisa is like Asiya. And you see that basically in each one, in Dibur, there's Chochmah and Bina. And in Machshava, there's Chochmah and Bina. And in the Etzem, there's Chochmah and Bina. But it's an understood thing that the Chochmah and Bina and Machshava is a more refined level in the Chochmah and Bina and Dibur. Or certainly more than the Chochmah and Bina in the actual Maisa. Even though in the Maisa, there's actual, like it says, Betzalel was a Chocham. He was a Chocham of Asiya. But he knew how to make nice things, like a Chocham of Asiya. But it's understood thing that it's a Chocham, that Chocham of Asiya is not the same thing. It's a whole different level.
Right.
And that's the muscle of the atmos of the person meaning not the actual Atzmus. The Atzmus is like Mamish Yechida. And then there's the actual Naran of the person in the Moyach and the Lev and the liver, which is like the Midos Atzmiyim, but the Kalim, in other words, like inside of his actual body. Then there's the Machshava, which is like the hidden. It's already a Yesh, which is separate from the person himself, but it's hidden. And it's still very connected. Then there's like Dibur, which is like half and half. And then there's the Maisa, which is totally separate.
Right.
And this chapter you have to think about a lot. It means you literally have to go over and try to see, okay, so how does all of this apply, and what does really Bria mean? V'ishavus Amalochem u'neshames di'etzira hukmoi sandal hulu, which I saw different places, different things, what they called it, Bain Angel.
What they call what?
What they call, I saw some places where in Yetzirah it's called Matat, and in Asiya it's called Sandal. But he's calling Matat, and in Yetzirah he's calling it Sandal.
Right.
Chulu shekol navuas naviyim mepchinas netzach v'hei dezod Yetzirah kiyadua.
Except for Moshe.
Huh?
Except for Moshe.
Except for Moshe, right.